Alrighty, everyone. It is 7 o'clock. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for tonight's hybrid meeting and presentation with the Los Alamos Mountaineers. Before we get started, I want to make everyone aware that this presentation is being recorded. I'm Sarah Van Hoosier, an educator at Pajarito Environmental Education Center, or PEAC, in Los Alamos, New Mexico. I will be the moderator for tonight's talk. I want to acknowledge our wonderful members and donors for your generous support. For details about other PEAC programs, please visit peaknature.org. Just a few logistics for this presentation before we get started. Our presenter will be taking questions via Zoom chat and from our in-person audience. For those of you watching from home, find the chat feature in the Zoom app menu bar. Type your questions to the PEAC moderator in the chat window anytime during the talk, and I'll read them during the Q&A at the end. Please remember that not everyone in the room here with us has a microphone, so there may be a delay when we're listening to a question from the live audience. Don't worry, we'll be back in a second and repeat the question for everyone to hear. After this talk, you will receive a short evaluation. Please take a moment to fill that out. Your input helps us improve future programs. I will now pass it over to Sylvie to start the Mountaineers meeting.
Thank you. All right, I'm happy to welcome everybody to our August 2024 meeting. I'm Sylvie Adam, this year's president of the Los Alamos Mountaineers, and I continue to have the easiest job at every one of these meetings, which is just to present to you our agenda. So here it is. We have 3 items today. I'll pass it to Jean, who will talk to us about remembering Bart. She'll do the trip report for July and August, and then Juliana will introduce our main presentation. So here we go. Thanks for being here.
Our dear friend and fellow mountaineer, Bart Olinger, passed away at the end of July. He was our programs chair for 3 years in the mid-2000s and an all-around great guy and avid outdoors person. Bart was enthusiastic about hiking, backpacking, cross-country skiing, whitewater kayaking. The photo on the left is a trip we did hiking the Pecos Wilderness from north to south. And it's Lana and Bart and Dusty, John Berg, Robbie, and John Watson Jones. We had a great 4-day hike through the wilderness. And on the right is a cross-country ski trip we did to the Spruce Hole Yurt up on Cumbres Pass. Al and Stephanie Boucher on the left, then Bart in the middle, and Don Creer and Gwendolyn Gallagher on the right. And you see that big smile always. Bart loved getting out. He was happy to be out, and he would always lend a hand. And he was always really fit. The photo on the left is from Michael Altair from the 2015 Mountaineers Rock Climbing School. And Bart, at 72 years old, was a star pupil. And on the right was Bart on a backpack trip we did in the South San Juan Wilderness just 2 years ago. Bart was a good man, and he will be sorely missed. All right, it's been a big summer. To date, approximately the Mountaineers have had over 50 trips this year and over 400 participants. So we've done really, really well. And July and August was jam-packed full of trips. Ellen Mills has led 10 Monday night hikes up Pajarito Mountain with potlucks. And so I didn't include 10 pictures, but they all include lovely scenery of the mountain in the early evening and people chowing down on some great food. Thank you so much, Ellen, for shepherding that this summer. Bill Podorsky had a whole bunch of trips this summer. Thank you, Bill. These are some photos from hiking up San Antonio Mountain. It's a classic isolated, very tall hill in northern New Mexico that you drive past on your way to Colorado. You hike up the west side, and there's not really a trail. It's some scrambling up. And he had 5 folks go up that day, and they had glorious weather. Bill led another trip. This one was Cañada del Ojitos, which is the Canyon of the Little Springs near Polvadera Peak in the northeast part of the Jemez Mountains, and 9 folks went on that trip. Zach sponsored our joint Los Alamos Mountaineers Peak hike, one of the joint activities for our 2 organizations on July 20th, and he had 6 folks that did the loop from the Santa Fe ski basin up Lake Peak to Penitente Peak and back. And Penitente Peak is one of the most beautiful spots in the southern Sangre de Cristos. Treat yourself sometime to that. Hard hike, though. And then the champion for the summer, again, is Zach for the rubber ducky. 27 people turned out. And there was, as Zach would call it, Fruit Loops in chocolate milk. It was a perfect day. And we had 2 extra participants as we came back past Pajarito Spring on the way back, 2 very large western diamondback rattlesnakes. They were very polite and warned us as we approached, so everything worked out. Bill Podorski did a really fun hike to the Valles de los Indios on the northeast corner of the Valles Caldera. And they go through some old homesteading sites, so the group did a fun photo there. And there were 12 people on that trip. Sylvia, Adam, and I sponsored a beginner backpack trip. We started out with 9 people, and we had 6 come out with us. It's just we have a nice partnership with Peak to do this. Peak has backpacks, sleeping bags, tents to loan so people can try it out without having to buy the whole equipment. And many thanks to all the mountaineers. I put out a call to borrow a few more backpacks to make sure we had kind of a wide variety of sizes of people on the trip. And at least 20 people volunteered their packs. So it was really great, and I really appreciate that. Oh, things came up and they didn't come. They had other. Oh no, we had 9 people. 9 people who came. We have a first night orientation where we spend a couple hours learning about how to pack a pack, how to put it on, what size to get, and all that sort of thing. And then what kind of personal gear you have to take, a raincoat and hiking shoes and this sort of thing. And 3 of them weren't able to come that weekend, so that I didn't lose them. Okay. Sorry. Well, it wouldn't have been a good ratio there. Wouldn't have met Mountaineer standards. Kathleen Gritzmacher led what's become kind of an annual Mountaineers trip to the 10th Mountain Huts up in central Colorado above Leadville. And 12 folks came, and you can see they had some weather to deal with, but one group summited north Mount Massive, and they all had a wonderful time. I thought I was told Mount Massive also, North Mount Massive. In fact, you're the one who told me that you did. Oh, last year. Okay. Sorry, I got it mixed up. Holy Cross. Some of them went up Holy Cross. Sorry about that. All right. Norbert Enslin pushed his trip back a week and had for looking for better weather, and 6 folks had fabulous weather to climb up San Luis Peak. And on the picture on the right, they also had another kind of mission to do. They spread some of the ashes of our pal Jan Studebaker on that trip as well. And Bill Podorsky did a trip with, let's see, 8 folks up to Kenilworth Mountain and did a loop on the Continental Divide Trail. Gives you fabulous views over the Chama and Tierra Maria Valley. And they had 8 folks come on that. So an excellent summer of hikes, Bill. Thank you very much. All right, future trips. Okay, there's still Tuesday, Thursday rock climbing sessions going on. If you go to the Mountaineers website, these are local get-togethers to go rock climbing. And on the calendar page, they show which place the rock climbing is going to take place at. And then Monday night, I think Ellen's going to keep going for a few more weeks for hiking up Pajarito Mountain and having a wonderful dinner. In October, Bill has a llama trek. The trip's currently filled, but there might be a waiting list. So if you're interested, talk to Bill. And then the Moab Hike, Bike, and Explore trip, a week-long trip in November in Moab, Utah, still has some space available. And that's a really great opportunity to get out and see lots of parts of Utah. So, and then closer to home, there's some trail volunteer opportunities. There have been some really successful work parties this summer working on various trails to clear them out and combat erosion. One trail day is going to be Saturday, September 28th in White Rock. And then the Cleanup Los Alamos Day is going to be September 21st. And so you can look online at volunteerlosalamos.org and find out about those. And then for any of you who might not be a member yet, if you join the Mountaineers, you get a personalized email just to you to invite you to the trips. You can always look online to find out what trips are going, but you could get an email directly to your computer inviting you. So join the club. All right, with that, Juliana.
All right. So it is my honor to introduce Beth Cortright and James Hunter, who will talk about adventures in Indonesia, but I want to say a couple things first. So I am your program chair, along with Ann Sansanji, and Ann and I co-lead the programs, and so we work very hard to bring very interesting talks to you on a monthly basis, fourth Tuesday of the month, and we try to do a wide variety, looking at biking, climbing, hiking, skiing, rafting, and we're always open to scheduling the next year or so of talks. And we're getting ready for our annual event at Fuller Lodge, the Potpourri, which will happen December 11th, 6:30, and it's a potluck, and we'll have a cake, and we'll bring a main dish. I think it's enchiladas this year. Enchiladas? Probably. Okay, so we'll do that. And then we have the opportunity for 6 10-minute talks. And that is one of the highlights of our potpourri. So if you're interested in sharing adventures that you have done, please talk to Ann and I, and we'll send out an email as well as a reminder. Go ahead and grab us at the end of this talk to tell us if you're interested in sharing. But I want to introduce now the speakers. Beth is our host and co-lead at Peak, and she has been a partner for the last 2 years of my involvement as program chair and keeps us going, works with the speakers, makes sure Evan's dry runs work, makes sure that the slides are loaded. I can't do this without Beth. And so I'm so happy she decided to give us a talk about some of her adventures. It's a big highlight for the Mountaineers. So I will step aside and give the mic to Beth and James to share their adventures in Indonesia.
Test. Okay, so I'm James Hunter, and this is Beth. And we actually should have in parentheses here Jason and Tamara, who are sort of adventure companions on several of these trips. We gave a talk about Morocco in the past, and Jason in particular loves organizing things and researching things. And when he invites us on foreign trips, it's always a great opportunity because it's kind of like having a tour guide, but not exactly. So we cave with him in the U.S., but then we do these more, international sort of adventure sort of tour trips. And so big shout out to them for being great people to travel with. And we'll get to where this photo was taken partway through. I'm just going to go through and do a little bit of background on Indonesia because if I'm guessing most of you are like me, you don't know that much about Indonesia. And just a quick word on getting there. This is a tough flight. So we did Albuquerque to San Francisco to Singapore. If I remember right, it was about a 17-hour flight. We got a little hotel room at the Singapore airport for like 3 or 4 hours. And then we had to fly to Bali. And so we were sitting at like 30 something hours just to get there. So we will go, let's see if the where's the laser pointer on this? Up. Got it. Okay. I'm going to need that in a sec. So that's the first part of our trip, but just to put a little perspective on this, I had not appreciated quite how wide Indonesia is. And so, I just think of it as a country in Southeast Asia. Don't know that much about it. It spans more than the width of the continental United States. It spans that many time zones. Their motto is actually something along the lines of being different is stronger together. And so they're very proud of having many different languages, many different cultures, and still managing to work together as a group. And what we're talking about, let's see here, do we even have Bali on here? Yeah, so we visited right here. So one little piece of Indonesia. So just to put it in perspective, and then to just give you a few numbers on it, because I really hadn't thought about it. So it's about 18,000 islands. It stretches about 3,200 miles. And so this really gives you, a good perspective on that. Has the third most volcanoes of any country in the world. There's only one official language, Indonesian, but they speak about 700 languages. One of the islands we were on, they said, 17 different languages just on that island. And then about 275 million people. So put in perspective that landmass versus the number in the U.S., pretty heavily populated. Most of that's concentrated on just a couple of these islands. So it's really, it's pretty dense in some areas, pretty sparse in others. And by GDP, it's about the 7th largest in the world. So it's actually kind of an economic powerhouse. Just a little bit of background, a little bit of education on Indonesia. And then I'm going to turn it over to Beth for the first part of our travels.
Okay, thanks, James. So yeah, we after those very long flights, we just took a day. We spent 2 nights, I think, and just one day touring around Bali. And I know a lot of people travel there for various reasons. It's a very popular place to come from places in Australia, especially other areas and other places in that area. We stayed at this great place with the great gardens and right on, really close walking distance to the beach, and we toured around for a day. So we hired a car. Our main goal was to walk around this area with a restored temple. Actually, this was it was a shrine almost. It was a commemoration. I think it was built in the mid 80s to commemorate the hardships of all of the Indonesian people from the past. And it was a really neat place. Hardly any people there. It is nearby the I guess the government buildings there, and we experienced some food trucks, as they were, and some street food, which was very interesting, but great great landscaping, really neat interior to this building, and yeah, that was kind of our quick time in Bali. We didn't spend much time there. So next thing we did was fly out the next day. Once we kind of recovered a little bit, we took a flight, and like James said, this is a tiny little snapshot of the smallest islands you can see in like south central Indonesia. So we left from Bali, which is all the way on the left side of the screen there, and took the flight that's number 1 on there, all the way over to this place called Labuan Bajo. Labuan Bajo is the larger island on the far right side, and it had a pretty big big airport there, but that's the jumping off point for Komodo National Park. And Komodo National Park is, you guessed it, where you go to see the Komodo dragons in the wild. They exist on just a few islands around there, and you may have seen them in zoos around here. I remember growing up in Cincinnati when they debuted the Komodo exhibit, and it was a huge thing for the Cincinnati Zoo. So that was my connection to it. I remember going to the opening or seeing it soon after it opens and being just absolutely enamored by these giant lizards. We'll see more of those in a second. So on this map, I tried to give an idea of the flights and the boats. And so in general, we flew across to Labuan Bajo. We took numbers 2 and 3, our boats, out to Komodo National Park, and where we stayed just on the outskirts of the park on a small island. After that, we'll get back to we'll come back to this map and see the other flights and boats later in the presentation. So Komodo National Park, this is actually coming in on our first boat from Labuan Bajo out to Komodo. This is not Komodo Island. This is a small, I cannot remember the name of the island, but it's a resort that's on a very small island with nothing else on the island. And it mostly caters to divers. It's a very popular place for scuba diving. But we were there just to enjoy the beautiful scenery. Great snorkeling right out in the waters, right out your front door. And a beautiful hike. So this was the evening that we arrived. We took one short hike. Actually, it wasn't that short. It took most of the evening, and we were up there through sunset, but it was absolutely beautiful. We got up to the top of this island that we were staying on, and yeah, realized that there is nothing else on this island except for these little huts on the one coast. Saw some wildlife, great birds. There I am sitting on a rock birding, trying to get pictures of birds, and we watched the sunset from high up, and it kind of gave us a good intro to the country, to the place. We saw all the islands around, the sheep and trails going up the other islands, and yeah, and then we spent that night at the resort, and kind of planned our next travels, next couple days. Our plan for the next couple of days after that was we were spending 4 days, 3 nights, just on the outskirts of that national park, and the main goal of, well, almost the entire trip was to see the Komodo dragons in the wild. So we had this elaborate plan of how we were gonna, plan A was like see dragons the first day, and then like figure out the next couple of days, they're open, see what sounds fun, where we're gonna go from there. Plan B was like dragons, try to see dragons, try to see dragons, try to see dragons. Plan A was, absolutely see the dragons. So we jet boated over the next morning to Komodo Island, which is one of the larger islands in the area, and yes, it's one of the main islands that has Komodo dragons on it. The guy on the left here was our from the scuba company, the resort. He rode on the boat with us. He stuck with us the entire time, arranged our guide when we got there. When we landed on the island, there was a large cruise ship. It was probably 1 to 300 people um, offloading on this dock, and we were like, "Oh God, no! There's no way we're going to see anything. We're not, we're not going to get out of these crowds or anything." This guy like took us. He was like, "No, no, no! Like we're going to do what you want. We're going to get you out there," and we were fine to hike and go as far as we needed to go. Spend the entire day on the island looking for Komodos if we had to. So he got us in there. He got us arranged with this guide, and you see the stick that he's holding. All of the guides on the park have these forked sticks, and those supposedly they're going to use them to hold down the head of the Komodo dragon if one gets too close. Seems unlikely, but
Yeah,
but
so I actually asked because, I'd read about Komodos beforehand, and they can run in excess of 20 miles an hour, and they primarily eat deer, and they kill about a person every 2 years on this island. So seeing that forked stick as our sole protection definitely made you think a little bit.
yeah, but these guys were great. They understood what we wanted and got us out there. Um, Before we even really started out on the path, we saw a very young Komodo dragon. So these guys, when they're younger, they're much more colorful. They're more slender. They can actually climb trees, and they're climbing mostly to get away from bigger Komodo dragons that would eat them. But that's one of the babies, and that's a closer up view of the younger one of the younger Komodos. So like right away we were so excited, oh, this is great. We saw one, check the box, and from there it just kind of got better. So let's see, upper right. Oh, it's a little blown out here in the room. There's a Komodo laying down. Hold on, let me see if I can help. There's a Komodo laying down in this kind of muddy low patch here, and they actually pump water up to spots like this to attract them to like the mud holes, I guess, so that people can take pictures like this. So yeah, it looks great. It looks like, hey, we're in the wild, we're keeping our distance, but we take the tourist photo with the Komodo. And what you don't see is similar to the people that are now showing, like, here's the Instagram spot and here's what it really looks like. That was the outskirts. So like I said, we, very, very soon after getting on the island, we realized like this is not gonna be maybe what we thought it was. We were kind of down, but still we saw some, right? Saw some dragons. But really, we took those pictures and we hightailed it out of this area, because what we were told from the guides is that most of the people do a short trek around the island, and there was like a short trek, a medium trek, and these are all loops, and then a long one. And there was also the adventure trek. There were no guides available for the adventure trek that day, but we got out on the long. We were like, yes, let's go to the long one. Like less people, perfect. Once we left this area, we did not see a single other person, and we saw lots of great wildlife. We got up high, we got a good view. This is that one that was in the mud hole. And you can see actually on the bottom left, you can see the pipe running across there, or just a hose bringing the water to make the mud. It was just, it's one of those things that I didn't know was on my bucket list until I did it. Seeing these in person was fabulous. A highlight of my life so far, for sure. So the rest of that long trek was kind of like this. So actually, this is up higher, kind of jungly, good trail going through the middle there. But we were and you're required to have that guide with you the entire time you're on the island. You're not allowed to leave them. And we were very glad to have him around, and to have our guy from the resort as well. They helped us out, and especially on times like this when you can't quite see it, but kind of just left of center, there's a giant female Komodo laying in the shade of that tree. So here she is, very camouflaged and just kind of escaping the heat. She didn't really move at all, or very, very little, even though we went around, took pictures, skirted around her. She kind of, I'm sleeping, moved around a little bit, but actually, one thing we talked about a lot when we were on our way to Komodo to see the Komodos was that some people had those bad reviews of national parks. Some people had posted reviews that like all they saw was one like lying in the shade and not moving at all ever, and it was the most boring thing. This was not a boring day for us, but it was interesting to see this one laying down. We got some close-up photos of the head and the feet. And it was great to have this experience with this one. In total, walking around the island, we saw 9 Komodo dragons that day. And it turned out for the rest of our time there, we didn't go back. We didn't go back to see the Komodos. We decided to explore other places nearby, and see what else we could see. On that long trek, I mentioned the other wildlife. This spider was bigger than my palm, my entire hand, I think. And across the trail, we had to kind of duck underneath it. There were lots of other reptiles, little skinks and lizards running around. James mentioned that the Komodos mostly eat deer. This is a very small deer on the bottom right. It probably didn't stand much more than like 3.5 feet tall, and little antlers, and of course out in the when you're on the dock, you can see turtles and stingrays around. Excuse me. Really, really great wildlife to see as well. I did a little bit of birding, saw just as much as I could walking around. Great birds in the area. Extremely diverse islands around here. So I mentioned, we didn't go back to Komodo. I think this was even later that day. There's some famous places around there, like the Pink Beaches. I think we had lunch on one of the pink beaches. These are beaches turned pink from the crushed up corals. There's like dark red corals that occur just out on the reefs, and they wash up and turn the beaches pink. We went to some spots, some short hikes throughout the days. This one was really neat because I think maybe on the next photo you can see, oh, no. Sorry. That one was really neat because you could see 3 different colors of beaches from up high there. This was called Padar Island. And oh, that's Komodo in the background. So the entire landscape that you see at the very top of the photo is Komodo Island. So we were almost back there, but yeah, from this point up here, we could see a black beach, a white beach, and a pink beach. Really, really neat scenery, just amazing rock formations, and that typical volcanic or formed islands. Kind of logistics wise, the resort had meals included. So they packed up lunches for you each day, or did breakfast in the morning. They would set out lunches either at kind of shade shelters like this, or I think this was a little store. You could also buy little snacks or chips or things. They brought everything we needed: a rice, and usually a rice, a meat, and a vegetable dish. One of the evenings around Komodo, we took a boat tour that took us out to I don't know, somewhere in the middle of between a couple islands, And this is the spot where you watch all of the flying foxes, the giant bats, come from the mangroves where they spend the days to the mainland where they eat fruit all night. And they're amazing. They were huge, absolutely giant bats. And you look up and see the typical shape of a bat, but it's a, I don't know, 2.5 foot wingspan. Another cool thing you could see up there is you see the typical bat wingspan on the left, and on the right, there's one that's not your typical wingspan of a bat or silhouette of a bat. That's a sea eagle. It's a very large raptor. It's trying to get an evening meal, and disguises itself in amongst those thousands, tens of thousands of bats. We had some just amazing scenery, great sunset. I think I went just up the hill above the huts this night to take a photo. It was beautiful. The water was pristine. This was probably the best snorkeling we had on the trip, was this first place we went. Saw stingrays and turtles, and I don't know all my fish of the reefs, but there's so many fish, so colorful. And they especially at this place, they were very protective of their reefs. No walking out. You have to go from the dock. You have to, they tell you how to go with the current to cause no damage to their reefs. And there were other areas we saw later in the trip that didn't do that, and we could definitely tell the difference. So that kind of completed our time around Komodo, and this is how we traveled most times, going from place to place, just hoping that we didn't hit a big wave and send our suitcases overboard. But yeah, this was leaving Komodo, and let's see, we did the boat trips on the right to get back to Labuan Bajo, and we went back to that main big island on the far right, Labuan Bajo. We took a car to a different part of their coast, and then we took another boat that same day to out to some more obscure caves. These are caves that are right near the sea shore, not necessarily sea caves, but a lot of them have well, in Mexico we'd say cenotes. They're underground lakes, little they're right at the water table. They can't get much higher. So you can go in and take a swim. There's the entrance to one. I think this is the Rengar Cave is one of the first ones, and we I think every cave that we went to on this trip, we had the place to ourselves for the most part. Great water, really neat formations in there, and fresh water. Yes, it's fresh. It was comfortable. I guess it was very warm down in those at the bottom of those steps at the edge of the water. Very humid because all of the humidity sits down in there, and but yeah, comfortable temperature. Back further in, we took the boat back, and back on the mainland, we went to a more developed cave. This one had some, an elaborate set of walkways and steps leading up to it. There's James in one of the passages. Lots of skylights in these caves. James is gonna.
They're all limestone.
Yeah, all limestone caves. And a lot of them had pathways that went in and out of daylight. This one had this spot where you come up way high, and you're at the base of these trees with just crazy, giant roots coming down. There were some monkeys in the tops of these trees. We didn't get a great look at them, but it was neat to see. And then we took some other little adventures on Labuan Bayo. We went looking for this Rami waterfall, and it was just a hike on the outskirts of some of the some farmland. When we parked and we paid somebody at the house and they sent their daughter out and the daughter walked us up the path and for I don't know, mile or so, and around the cows and pigs and past the are they rice fields? Right, yeah, rice fields, and flooding the fields, which was neat to see, and the water movement along there. Oh, there were fish swimming in this one as we walked by, and she guided us all the way up there. And the reward was this beautiful, beautiful waterfall in the middle of the jungle. And we took a swim. I think three of us maybe took a swim in the base of this at the base of this one. Super fun. And I think that that wrapped up our time at Labuan Bayo. We took our fourth leg. Took a flight over to this it's the island just to the east of Bali. It's called Lombok, and I think I'm gonna hand it over to James to talk about what we did there.
Okay, so Lombok, this was kind of our secondary goal after seeing the Komodo Dragons was to climb one of the taller mountains in Indonesia. And so Jason and Tamara picked Mount Rinjani, which is a fairly tall volcano. It's not the tallest mountain in Indonesia. There's one on the far east that's a substantially more technical peak. But yeah, that was our goal, and we had you have to do it with a guide. A lot of these countries, this is really how they're making their living, and so we had gotten a mountain guide and got set up to do it over. It was really 2 days basically. So trek up, spend the night. And so Lombok, our first step was to get to the town we were going to meet the guiding company at, spend the night there, get an early start. So this was the photo getting up early in the morning to start the trek up, and just gorgeous area. One of the interesting things about Indonesia is you have very different religions across the archipelago. And so this island, Lombok, was primarily Muslim. And so here we would wake up to you'd hear the call to prayer every few hours. And so on other islands, you didn't hear that. This one, I mean, that woke us up every little bit. And it turns out a lot of the challenge of mountaineering here is not the mountain. It's just that you're on the other side of the world, jet lagged, maybe a little sick because the food's something you're not used to, and then you don't sleep well. But gorgeous area. And it's a lot of, as we saw before, rice farming. So, yep, that was the start. This is looking at just a route map on the gosh, this was a poster at the guiding company. And so we're doing this route right here. And really what they try to sell is, so we go up here and then that's your summit day right there. There's a giant lake. That was the photo on the cover of the talk, and we'll show a few more of that. You can do more of a trek. So you could do like a 4-day trek where you hit a hot spring, you stay at the lake, you summit the peak. We were on a pretty tight time schedule, so we just did the direct route. And in addition to the poster, this was checking in. This is a national park, and they actually have quite strict control of the guiding companies. And so we had to check in. There are various forms to do, and they got a really nice 3D rendering of the or 3D model of the mountain. And you'll see photos of this, but it is, a classic volcano. It's got a large crater, got a large lake in it, and this had erupted, I want to say 2019. 2018, so we'll show a photo of that. But it was actually fairly new that people were allowed back on the climb. So that's getting ready. And you can also tell we're wearing down jackets now. So we're up at about 6,000 or 7,000 feet was the launch off point, and it's quite a bit cooler than the rest of the trip. So, oh, come on. That's that. Let me see here. Yeah, I don't know if I can pick the route out on this screen. Yeah, actually I can. So yeah, we're gonna get dropped off. I want to say somewhere here. Trek up. All of these, so they have sort of little developed like way stations as you go up. So we'll show photos of those. But trek up, and then this ridge up here is high camp. We'll show photos of that, and then basically you're going up the cinder cone at the top, and then we reversed that and can you go reverse that and went down in a day. So they take pretty good care of you. So we got, of course, boxed lunches to carry with us. And this doesn't really show the perspective, but it's the usual adventure when you're in a developing country. We're sitting in the back of a pickup truck, and that's how we got there. So it was just all four of us on this, bouncy dirt road, right in the bed of the truck. So comfortable, bit of an adventure. This is Trailhead starting out. That's the truck we were riding in. So, seatbelts aren't a thing, right? You figure if you hit something, you're going to jump for it and hope it goes well. But it's a lot of fun. It's cooler. We've been kind of sweating the whole trip. And you see our backpacks are not exactly huge, so you really don't carry your own pack in this sort of thing. They provide porters, and this area is very poor, and so we're paying very little money and supporting their lifestyle. I shouldn't say lifestyle, supporting them surviving there at all, and it helps protect the park. And so part of this is, it's not what you can do yourself. It's working with the local community. And to give a feel for it, we're hiking up. This is one of the porters coming down, and there were extensive people. They carry these. I can't actually tell what he's got. Most of them wear flip-flops because that's the best footwear they can afford. It's not because they like them, it's because that's what they can afford. And so they're making their living off of it. And you can start to see now that's the summit of the peak. So we're going to head up to the right, back across. Camp must be somewhere up in here. And yeah, that's the route we're looking at. And it started out quite hot. So moving along, this was way station 1, and just having some shade there was really nice. So just took a break, got some water, and our porters really didn't hike with us. They mostly went ahead and they would set up food or set up camp. Yeah, we had a guide with us. You basically, everywhere you go, you have a guide, and we're just getting closer to the mountain. So that's that area. This is the second way station. There was a lot more of a setup. This is kind of one of their safety bases for the park as well. There were some park people there. There's fruit trees, and our we had our guides carried everything, or our porters carried everything, but you could buy food, buy water, or you could camp here if you wanted to. And there were, I don't know, 30 people there maybe, so it's reasonably popular. And continuing up, this is kind of what a lot of the hike looked like. So it was this very steep dirt trail with mixed terrain. Higher up, we got into a few trees. And it turned out, going up, it doesn't look too bad. It's a killer on the knees coming down. We were going from about 6,000 or 7,000 up to the summit was about 12,000. And so coming down with essentially zero switchbacks on kind of an angle of repose slope is tough. And here you can see we've got soil. You'll see what the top was like. It got a bit uglier, but very pretty terrain. And then this is one of my favorite engineering aspects. There was one little climb up that it was like an eroded out bank, and this was the ladder up it. And it held, but you're like, what? I don't understand how this is still here. And there were those guys are carrying their huge things with their flip-flops, and they go running up it. And yeah, it was a sort of a classic ladder situation. And you can also start to tell this is getting into volcanic ash now, and it starts to get looser and looser. So later in the day, it's nice. Clouds rolled in, and so it wasn't quite as hot. These things really brought in a lot of moisture, so you'd actually feel like a really cool, like almost condensing on you sort of air. And that made the second part of the hike quite a bit better. I think we were gaining maybe 3,000 feet or something, so it wasn't bad with light packs, but it was a bit of a workout. This is the next rest stop, and we're really just taking a short break. It's sort of traditional for them to do that. And then they carried all water. So there was a spring up there, but they didn't want to mess with purifying it. So they had bottled water for every stop. Yeah, so that's that. And now we're headed up. This is actually hitting the start of the ridge for camp. And so fairly barren, fairly volcanic soil. We're just coming up to that. That's the first set of tents. And there were, 20 groups camped up there, 25 groups, a lot of people. And you can see what we're looking at to do the next morning. And another view of it's just this long, skinny ridge. And so groups would just set up with little camps all along that ridge. We ended up going a little bit higher. And so we were kind of one of the last camps headed up towards the summit. I don't think we actually have a photo of our camp. There were monkeys up there begging for food. It was moderately clean. The park had an interesting policy. Our guides had to check back in and show all the garbage they'd carried out. And so the park's policy was you absolutely have to carry garbage out, and they'll fine people that don't. it was still fairly dirty by our standards, but the guide said that, this is like the heart of the economy for that entire island. And there were some negative reviews about how dirty it was. And so they're trying to be very conscientious about keeping it clean to make sure they don't lose tourism, because that is the only way they make money. Yeah, so close up of the monkeys up there. And we were treated pretty well. They carried up dishes, they did all the cooking. So pretty fancy setup, right? And they carried up the tents. I can't say they had the cheapest thermarest sorts of things I've ever slept on. Like it was not the most comfortable bed. But the other oddity of these tents, these are actually blackout tents. And so they wanted you to go to bed early because for some reason the tradition on this mountain is you climb it and see the sunrise. So we were getting up at 2 a.m. to see the sunrise, not because you had to, but for the arbitrary reason that apparently that's what you do on this mountain. So they wanted us to get to bed early, and you use these blackout tents so you can sleep. And coming from the other side of the world, that wasn't too tough. So then this is that lake. So this is kind of the view from camp. We didn't put the photo in, but there's a couple tents here, and this photo's taken from where we're camping. So beautiful spot. This is where the other trek will come in here, and then you can come up to the ridge, so you can go camp down there. This whole black area with no vegetation that Beth is highlighting is the lava flow from the eruption in 2018. And there were a number of structures where we were camped that all collapsed from earthquakes when that occurred. So still a pretty active volcano. This is what our morning looked like. So it was get up at 2 a.m., line of people with headlamps, fight with the line, hike up. You can't really see it in this photo. This is all loose volcanic ash, basically. And so it was like one step up, half a step back for a large part of this climb up. There were so many people, it was dusty enough that you were like hacking up like dirt from just inhaling it. And then a good number of the guides smoke, so there was cigarette smoke everywhere. So it was a little bit of a rough hike up, but beautiful view of the island. I mean, that's the ocean out there. These are ships, and then we can see the town. And then camp's probably like right there, maybe. So that was that view. And then this is now we're actually right at the edge of the summit as the sun is starting to come up. And you can see there's a few people up there. It was very pretty seeing the sunrise. I'm not sure if it's worth getting up at 2 a.m., but it was very pretty. I'll go to that a little more. So that's the obligatory group summit shot where everyone else gets out of the way. And yeah, it was gorgeous, and it was cold. You can tell we're pretty well dressed up. And this is about 12,200 feet. So doesn't sound high from our standards, but the fact that you're going from sea level up to 12.2 and you can see the ocean is definitely a bigger relief than we typically get in the United States. Let's see here. So just to give a little perspective, that's the route up. You can see all the people here. So it doesn't look that steep, this photo, but this was like a 45-degree, just loose scree slope. And so it was a workout to get up that thing. Long way along the ridge. This was like a scree shoot down, and then our camp is on this ridge. And then it's down here is how we actually approached. So it wasn't what I'd call technically difficult, but it definitely had some aggravating components just with how loose it was and how many people there were. And that's what the summit actually looks like. So, people get out of your way, so you do a group photo. I think we actually did the group photo on this little sub-summit because we're like, screw it, we've been to the summit. We're going to go sit on the lower one where there's no people. But a bit of a crowding experience. And this was the group that made it early. There were probably 4 times as many people still coming up. So fairly crowded. Oh, sorry. Right. Yeah, that's the trail. And then flipping forward. So that's the photo from the first slide. The interesting thing here is you look at this and you go, there's another mountain there. That's actually the shadow of the volcano we're on the ocean. And so it shows you just how volcano shaped it is. And that's maybe a little better view of this as your fresh lava flow from about 5 years before. So headed back down, and we've still got a good number of slides. This just shows how loose it was. Let's see here. What were we trying to illustrate here? Yeah, just more of that's the angle of proposed slope. So once you got out of that vegetation, it was kind of tough. And then headed back down, and I think we did basically all the down in a day. So like I said, that was a little brutal, but fun. What? Oh, right. Now looking back up. Yeah, that's the summit. So now we're way back down. What else do I want to say here? And that is on to the next island. The one other thing I'll say here is that it's worth appreciating just how poor people are. So like one of the things I've picked up over the years is if I have an old pair of boots and I'm going to the other side of the world and I don't want to lug them all the way back, I take them and I give them away. So Beth did that this time. And, we had all male guides and we're like, oh God, they're Beth. So Beth asked real nicely. She's like, hey, I'm going to throw these boots away. Does anyone want them? And the guides were like, oh my God, we will find a home for these, and they were completely bare sole, like there's no tread left. And they're like, this is better footwear than every porter on that mountain has. Someone will use them. And so it is sobering to say, we're going there for the fun of it, but it is a really poor area, and us going as tourists helps them quite a bit economically. So, and I'm going to turn it back over to Beth for kind of the last little bit of the trip.
All right. So yeah, leaving the big mountain was I don't know, a little sad. But we saw it actually a couple more times from flights and from boats. It was kind of neat. The last thing that we did on this trip was kind of a total wind down. We went to this place called Gili. There are actually 3 islands off of the northwest coast of Lombok that are in a kind of a little line there. And they're super tiny. And one neat feature of them is that there's no motorized vehicles larger than, say, a moped or a motorcycle. So most of the travel is either by bike or by horse-drawn little carts. They kind of this, especially Gili Trawangan Island, they kind of get a reputation for being party islands. There's definitely strips where there's like your tattoo parlors and your bars and your, I don't know, it's lots of restaurants and party scenes, clubs almost. Again, another popular spot to go, either straight over from Bali or nearby. So we went to these islands and we picked again, Jason did all of his research, and he picked a spot that was on the opposite side of the island from the popular strip. So we landed we boated over to the island and picked a couple carts, horse-drawn carts, waved them down and told them the resort place we were going to, and they loaded us up with our luggage and took us off across the center of the island. It's a pretty flat island, small short jungles through there. You can see all the bikes there as well. And we stayed in these little cabins. We were there kind of on a shoulder season. This was, I guess we didn't mention, it was in June 2023. Kind of just off of the really popular season to be there, so it wasn't too crowded at all, especially at this place that was much more quiet. And I'm taking this picture. The beach is, I don't know, what, 50 feet behind me, and there's a section of beach that was private there. You could go request the snorkel gear or take bikes or whatever you'd like from there. Really really colorful stuff around Gili Islands, especially the like many islands, they have a bit of a cat problem, but it keeps the mouse and rat problem down. Neat shops that we visited here and great food. Did a little bit more snorkeling and kind of wound down after the big Mount Rinjani trek. Some more wildlife, just because this was some of my highlights. It's on the right. It's a tokay gecko, and these things are, I don't know, 9-10 inches long. Pretty large and very very loud if they end up on your ceiling or on your roof at night. But there are a lot of geckos there that'll say gecko when they're on your ceiling at night. This one sounds more like tokay, and that's the tokay gecko. So we found a few of those going out herping at night. couple of I think it's a pit on the top left, and white-eye, warbling white-eye on the bottom left, if you're into birding. And yeah, we had a couple more really nice sunsets out there. I don't think that's Rinjani in the background, but yeah, we had some neat photo ops around that island. We took one short hike to the biggest hill on the island where there's an old what was that?
It's actually it's an old defense tunnel from World War II. It's a is it Japanese? Can't remember. Yeah, it was a tunnel bored in during World War II as a defensive emplacement.
So I think we took bikes over to that one evening. So just neat things we could see around, just seeing what we could find. And of course, Jason had lists of options of things to go see and places to eat as we went around. I think I took this picture because I was so sad to leave this water for the last time. This was our last boat trip leaving Gili, and we started our trek home. So from the 5 and 6 up there is right around where the Gili Islands are. So we boated out to those, and then back to the Lombok Airport. Took a short plane ride over to Bali, and then our plane rides home from there. I write down a couple neat stats. We ended up taking 9 flights for the trip. We took, in general, 8 boat rides. I think there were some that were shorter, short island to island during the days around Komodo. Generally about 6 car hires. We took 4 horse carts, and we rode 4 bicycles. So that was kind of by the numbers of the trip. We did one last cave visit at the very end before we left Lombok. Or was this back on Bali? No, it must have been on Lombok. Really neat family that owns this land, and they did this up with huge like bats in the mosaics, and really neat cave here. And the main reason to go to this one was for the wildlife around there. It's a lots of bats. I'm pretty sure all those dots on the tops and all of the high spots in this area were a bunch of bats. We're standing on solidified guano mounds, and lots of probably cockroaches and crickets. So we toured around in this cave, caught a gecko, not a tokay, but still a pretty large gecko. We did see a tokay in this cave, and we saw their eggs as well, which is really neat. And they had you wear nice little hard hats, and you can see the cockroaches on the wall behind me. That's great. Okay, so unless James, you want to add anything else?
No, I think that's pretty much it. It was a fun trip. It was definitely a very, very different experience. They dug a pit toilet.
So the question is, how did they handle the human waste on Mount Rinjani? Yeah, they dug a deep pit and put up a little 1-room pop-up tent, 100 feet from the
like 100 feet camp. Definitely wasn't great. Like, you got the camps every day doing that. But yeah, they did a small pit toilet. Oh yeah.
How was the smell? Was it like overwhelming?
So the question is, how was the smell in the cave at the end? No, I think it was pretty dry.
It wasn't great, but it
Right.
wasn't overwhelming by any means.
But nothing like what you see in
like Borneo or something, where they have the like living mounds of guano, basically.
the walls were pretty well coated, like a more a wet
Yeah. It also that
living.
cave had a lot of airflow, so never really like you were in a really enclosed area. That it was pretty open.
Oh,
It looks like there weren't very many trees up on that mountain. Is that because they've all been logged or there's no?
so the question is were there not any trees up on the volcano?
I would say there it's probably just the soil. There were no roads much. So basically where they dropped us off, there was a road that went like kind of one rest stop higher, and then there were no roads above that. There wasn't really scarring from them. So I don't think there's any way they logged it. I think that's actually mostly the volcanic soil. Lower down on the island, it probably was logging. But yeah. Ed?
Did either of you read Douglas Adams' book, Last Chance to See Him? If you thoughts on trust?
So the question is whether we wrote, or sorry, whether we read, I'm sorry, I didn't cut Douglas Adams' book. No,
No.
Last Chance to See.
Yeah, so neither of us has read it. I guess the one, I don't know about 30 years ago for Indonesia. It's a little bit, I in areas where I've been mountaineering where there's glaciers, for example, it's a much more dramatic contrast. But the sobering thing to think about is, those Komodo dragons are living on 3 islands in one nation in the world. And so they're pretty high, right? Sea level's not going to take them out, but one really bad typhoon, and that might be the end of that species. And the fact that there are tourists there seeing them is the reason they've not been shot and eaten, basically. And so that park's pretty well protected. It's fairly popular, but it is sobering to think that that's it. Like this, 10-foot lizard that's big enough to kill a person, and it's down to 3 little islands, and that's the only place left.
Yeah. So the question is about the cost to hike Mount Rinjani. Do you recall?
Remember, we'd have to pull up the spreadsheet. It's maybe 300 each, something
I
like
think,
that.
yeah, I think it was only $300 or $400 a person,
Yeah.
which included your, well, there was a night we had to spend in the village the night before we started off, and then breakfast the next morning, lunch that day, dinner that night, breakfast the next morning after you summit. And I'm not sure if they did set up a lunch for us at the part way down. So a bunch of meals, plus your guide that stays with you the entire time, the porters that take your stuff up to the camping location and back down. Yeah, everything was included. There's a I think we used Rinjani Trekker or Muji Trekker, Muji, and yeah, if anybody wants more information about the specifics, places we used, places we stayed, can email and I'll get those to you.
But I think more broadly, cost-wise, the one exception was Komodo Dragon or Komodo Island. That resort was like a full Western resort with power, air conditioning, everything. So that was I don't know, 200 a night for, per couple, something like that. Other than that, the primary cost is anytime you're burning fuel. And so the flights are not cheap. I mean, the flight over there is a huge part of it. And then the boats, we were taking, what they call jet boats. So like double or quad motor boats. Those are expensive. That's like Western price. You're paying hundreds of dollars. Guides, food, none of that was expensive. It is very affordable. It's just that as soon as you got to import fuel or you have to import something like an airplane, then it's expensive. But other than that, the trip really wasn't that bad. But you're on an archipelago and you have to fly unless you want to take a ferry for, a day, island or a day and a half. So, the how many flights was sort of sobering to do a trip like this. Yeah.
One of the islands you were on was Muslim. Beth, it didn't look like you had any special dress. Did the locals or women?
The question was on the more Muslim trending islands, did we have any special dress or yeah, the women change our dress? The answer is no. We researched that pretty heavily, especially because the last trip we did was Morocco, where it was very important in certain places to either cover your shoulders or down to your ankles, something like that. Uh, I think since they try so hard to cater to tourists so often, I mean, especially that last Gili Island, we ended up calling it Bikini Island because and various other names because there were people walking down the street with such skinny little things. It was
Yeah,
it's
the
it's a tourist
locals,
destination,
yeah.
especially for Australians. And yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
the locals definitely. I mean, the locals on the island, it was conservative dress for women. It wasn't like full burqa, but it was definitely pretty much covered. Hair was covered, but they somehow developed a working relationship with the. It's almost all Australians and New Zealanders, and some Europeans for Western tourists. And yeah, the dress on Gili was remarkable. And I guess the thing we didn't mention either is there's almost no Americans there. I'm assuming just because it's hard to get to, it's a little bit intimidating. But we talked to our mountain guide, and I think he said he'd been guiding. It was 13 years, 15 years, something
Yeah.
like that. He had guided 5 parties of Americans in that entire time. He said we
And
were the
he was
fifth.
guiding what
It was like,
2 or 3 times a month.
yeah, for 4 months. And so we probably saw a couple other Americans, but the only other native English speakers were Australia, New Zealand, and then it's Europeans and an extensive Asian tourist base. But English is basically the language for tourism there, and so we had no trouble with language anywhere we went.
Sarah, did you have any online questions?
No, we don't have any online questions. We had a great comment about your photos. They really enjoyed the one with the eagle amongst the bats and complimented you on your great photos.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
That was a tough photo to get, I think.
Yeah, I had a zoom lens and I struggled because I saw the eagle go through and I was like, oh, you can see how big those bats are. And that was a like, I want that photo because I'm gonna show people and they won't believe me when I say these bats are this big.
But it was getting darker and darker, and
Yeah, the lighting was tough for
they're
that.
flying fast and not very far above you, and you're on a boat.
And that we actually didn't really show. That was kind of when it was starting out because that was when there was enough light. There were probably 20 times that number of bats for an hour. It was just, you're staring at this island like, how could that island hold that many bats? So it was biologically quite remarkable. And I honestly, of all the stuff there, I would say that Komodo National Park is the place to go. Like if you're on that side of the world, it's very unique. The volcano's neat, but really the Komodo National Park there's no other place you're going to be able to do that.
So the question is whether they have to import any deer or meat to keep the Komodo population going on those islands. No, so those deer we showed those are just endemic little deer, and they're the main food source for the Komodos. Um, uh, I don't think they bait them at all. Like they don't feed them at all. They're very
Yeah.
hands off, except for bringing in water to make those mud holes. One really interesting thing about the deer, their relationship with the deer, since the deer are their main food source, they're so I don't know, something that Tamara brought to the trip was she really wanted to find some of their scat. And there are 2 reasons for that. Is that when they eat, there are 2 things that they eat that don't really don't digest well. And one thing are the hooves of those deer, and the other things are their own teeth, because they tend to be ripping when they eat, they don't, swallow things whole like a snake. They're ripping flesh off of deer. So they pull out their own teeth when they do this and swallow them, and they come out in their scat. And if you've ever had a snake or a lizard or seen the lizard poop out here on the sidewalks, it crumbles when it sits in the sun. So if you get out there with crazy American tourists that are just happen to be herpers and love lizards, and we poked around in the scat, and sure enough found some hooves and some teeth, and yeah, that was a highlight for Tamara for sure.
Yeah.
Finding the Komodo teeth in the scat, because you hear about these things and you're like, really? But oh yeah, we found it, and it was oh, she was just so happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike. Yeah, the question is, how are the pests, things like mosquitoes? So it was interesting. Some of the places we stayed, they had, especially when it was freestanding, it was a bedroom that was had a fan, using an air conditioning unit, and a bed net. And then you would walk out a door out the back, and it went into another room that was open air, that was your bathroom, shower, toilet, sink. And in some places the mosquitoes were pretty bad in the bathroom area, because they're attracted by the light and the water. I think for the most part on hikes and things, we didn't have very many problems with them.
Yeah, it was really only like, the couple, we had one or two showers where it was like you'd shower because it's this like enclosed but open ceiling, and then get back inside. But I mean, compared to Alaska or something, it actually wasn't bad mosquito wise. It's just that I'm trying to think I think we did do malaria medication, got, a handful of vaccines, but there's the list of diseases you can get from pests there is non-trivial, and so you are doing your best to avoid it. But it wasn't bad, I would say, on the scale of things.
I don't think we really ever used repellent.
No, we didn't come back going, wow, those bugs were bad. We noticed them when we were there, but I've been places where they were far worse.
Is that it for questions?
we got
Oh,
one more.
one more. Sorry. Where's Jason taking us next?
They're doing Peru next year, and we're debating if we're going to go. And then Jason and I have been discussing Kenya and Tanzania go to Kilimanjaro. That's maybe in a couple years. So
we also have tentative plans for Corsica.
Right, I forgot about that. Corsica might be 2 years.
Hiking across that island. Mm. Any other questions? Sarah?
All right. And those are all the questions that came in from viewers online. So thank you, James and Beth, for sharing your trip with us tonight. Everyone, please remember to look out for that quick survey coming to your email. Check out the Peak website for some great programming coming up, including an overnight geology tour, fall and winter outings, and our annual picnic in October. Thanks again for joining us this evening, and have a good night.